Amen. Put it on the floor, D. From the Gospel of John, John chapter 20. And if you would, look at verse 24 through 29. The situations of last week have once again arrested my attention. And I want to say a word on behalf of God as to what's going on in the world. John chapter 20, verse 24 through 29. I'm reading from the Good News translation this morning. Reads, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciple told him, we have seen the Lord. Thomas said to them, unless I see the scars of the nails in his hands and put my fingers on those scars and my hand in his side, I will not believe. A week later, the disciples were together again indoors, and Thomas was with them. The doors were locked. But Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. And he said to Thomas, put your fingers here and look at my hands, and then reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop your doubting and believe. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, do you believe because you see me? How happy are those who believe without seeing me. For the next few moments, I want to talk from this theme, testimony of a scar, and this is part 3. Testimony of a scar. Most of you have been watching the TV, in some cases ad nauseum, watching now the explosiveness of the situation in Baltimore. That situation follows what happened in Ferguson, follows what happened in New York. The situation follows the explosions going across urban areas all over this land. People are tired. People are hurt. People are sick and tired of low employment and unemployment. In truth, folks don't pay attention to the social milieu. The fact that 1% of the people in this country own 90% of the wealth. The fact that between the middle and the bottom is a great chasm. That if you're in the middle class, you're really only 2 paychecks away from being at the lower class. Most of the people you know are struggling trying to make it every day. And each of us now realizes that while the unemployment keeps coming out with statistics like 10%, 15% max, we know in some of our communities unemployment is as high as 30 and 40%. And for those who have any kind of record, their ability to get certain jobs is certainly cut off. If they have a felony record, their ability to participate within the democracy has been shut down to them. You realize that many people are struggling. Some people are getting a paycheck, but it's not a livable wage. Some folk are saying to themselves, I'm ready to give up. I made more money when I was running the street than I'm making when I'm trying to be legitimate. This is a difficult moment in our history. And what people don't realize is that some of you sitting in here, you are the first generation of the real free in your family. And by that I mean many of your great-grandparents were born in slavery. Many of your great-parents were actually born as sharecroppers. Some of your family members, your elders, were actually a part of the Jim Crow South and lived in a segregated America. And now you are some of the first people born in a more free society. Those of you born after the 60s cannot truly say you quite completely comprehend the tragedies of the early times, because it was a lot better. There were no separate water fountains, no separate facilities for you. But yet, you yet feel and sense the overwhelming part of discrimination. And discrimination is different nowadays. It's not just black and white. Now times it's poverty. The poverty line is as difficult as the color line. They don't like people who are non-pigmented who don't have money anymore. They like folk who are pigmented with money. You'll figure that out on the way home. It's a drastic change in the world. And now we see people resorting to violence, and some people actually have misquoted Dr. King, almost to say that Dr. King was for violence. They've quoted him as saying that violence is the voice of the voiceless or the unheard. I want to kind of reach into that, because if one were to listen to his interview with Mike Wallace, you'll hear Dr. King saying over and over again that if everybody turns to violence, if everybody turns to going back and fighting, I'll be standing there, if I have to stand there by myself, as a voice for nonviolence, as a voice for peace. And so what you have been hearing is Dr. King's analysis of what was going on in the world at that time. What's incredible is his 1967 analysis. It can be read and heard the same way even today in 2015. In 1967, 38-year-old Martin Luther King, then president of the SCLC conference and already a Nobel Peace Prize winner, went and took the podium at the American Psychological Association. At the APA's annual convention in Washington, Dr. King went up there and he said some really difficult things. He spoke, and his speech was reprinted in the Journal of Social Issues, volume 24, dated November 1, 1968. Here's what he said. He said, urban riots must now be recognized as durable social phenomena. They may be deplored, but they are there and should be understood. Urban riots are a special form of violence. They are not insurrections. The rioters are not seeking to seize territory or to attain control of institutions. They are mainly intended to shock the community. They are a distorted form of social protest. The looting, which is their principal feature, serves many functions. It enables the most enraged and depraved to take hold of consumer goods with the ease that the other folks does in using his purse. He says often the Negroes don't even want what he takes. He wants the experience of taking. But most of all, alienated from society and knowing that this society cherishes property above people, he is shocking it by abusing property rights. There are thus elements of emotional catharsis in the violent act. Dr. King goes on to offer this quote from Victor Hugo, which was given now over a century ago. Victor Hugo said, if a soul is left in the darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sin, but he who causes the darkness. We're living in a world that has a lot of darkness. We're living in a world that has some deplorable, depraved conditions. We're living in a world now that has some depressive parts of our society. And right now, each of us must come to grips with the fact that we have a chance now to do something in this hour. Our scars remind us of where we have been, and we do have scars, but they don't have to dictate to us where we're going. Each of us has a choice now what to do with the scars that we bear, how we're going to handle what we deal with. Or we can walk around ashamed of who we are, ashamed of where we are in life, ashamed of what life has done to us, ashamed of the mistakes we've made. We can walk around attempting to hide our scars, or we can wear them as proof that God still heals. We can let the world know that God still blesses and still brings people up out the muck and miry clay. We can let the world know that we may have been born in mud, but so too was a lotus flower. So we know how to bloom in the midst of mud. We can let our scars stand out as a beacon to others and tell them this is what it looks like when God takes you from the bottom to the top. The scars are hard to heal, but they can be healed, and they must be healed. And some of you sitting here today, you are truly survivors. You can join Beyonce and the girls and say, I'm a survivor. I'm not going to give up. I'm a survivor. I will not stop now, because you have survived hell and high water. You survived low expectations. You survived the miseducation. You survived this corrupt system. You survived injustice. You survived economic downturns. You survived racism, classism, sexism, militarism. You survived homophobia. You survived in the midst of the world. You're survivors. And you've got to make a decision about your scars. Your scars need to move you from where you are. Your scars can move you. You must move. You must move. Jesus taught us some lessons that are in the text. I know you saw them, but let me see if I can break them out again for you. Jesus taught us 3 lessons in the text. The first one is he teaches us to move from embarrassment to embracing. From embarrassment to embracing it. If you look closely at the text, the death on the cross would have been a shame. The death on the cross would have been embarrassing. The death on the cross would have brought one's head down low. And let's be honest, some of the stuff you're dealing with in your life right now, some of the stuff God has brought you through, you don't want nobody to know, and I understand that. You don't need to tell me, but understand this. At some point, you have to move from embarrassment to embracing. This is what I've been through. I done been through some things, and I'm embracing my pain. I'm embracing my pilgrimage. I'm embracing my powerlessness, because I'm getting my power back. I was reading the other day about a young lady named Cassandra Nord. She's a 22-year-old dancer, and there's a picture of her, a really rough picture of her. She has a birthmark on her face. It's a memorable scar. She was born in Alberta, Canada, and most times when people take a picture of her face, they want to digitally erase her birthmark. It goes across the side of her face. It's dark. It has hair in it. It may not be pleasing to most people, but she's learned how to embrace it. She says, it makes me unique and memorable. It makes me different. Folks looked at her and said, we ought to take it off. We ought to remove it. But if her parents find out that it would leave her heavily, even worse scarred, and that plastic surgery could leave her with a lazy eye, so they left it until she got old enough to make a decision for herself. Having endured people jeering at her, folk talking about her, taunts by bullies, taunts by folk that didn't like her, she learned how to embrace her scar. She learned how, fighting back tears, she said, I used to feel like I was ugly. I used to feel like I was not pretty, but now she has learned that which was on her body that would have made her ashamed has made her distinguished from everybody else. And this is important here, because, she was worried that nobody would like her, that she would never fall in love because she had this scar on her face. But Cassandra's scar didn't stop her from finding love, because she fell in love with a man named Patrick Cook, and they have been inseparable. Because you see, at some point, you need to have a Galway Ginnell experience. You never mind the self is at the least of it. Let our scars fall in love. At some point, you need to find somebody that can fall in love with your scars. At At some point, you need to realize that we're not special people. No, all of us have some scars on us. All of us have some jadedness. All of us have some unresolvable issues. But what we need to be able to do is to accept where we are and embrace it. And we ought not fool around with folk that can't fall in love with our scars. When you deal with another person, you have to recognize that the person you're dealing with is wounded also. And each one of you right now, some of you have been saved a long time, but you're still a wounded warrior. Each one of us got some things that we're dealing with. But what we have to get in our spirit is to understand that we've got to learn how to love ourselves so that somebody else can love us. You ought to have the kind of relationship where you can let somebody know, love me for me, with me just the way I am. Because if you can't love me the way I am, you don't want to love me where I'm going, because that's going to be phony. You've got to love me warts and all. Number two, Jesus says, you've got to move from embracing to exhibiting. You do know what he did, don't you? Jesus took his hands and said, look at my hands, and took his side, said, take a peek over here at my side. I need you to see my scars. Our scars are a part of us. They add to our character. They kind of shape us, make us lovable the way we are, but you got to be careful about showing your scars. Because some people will show their scars and they wear their past hurt and their past pain on their sleeve. So they operate as though they are supposed to be always pitied. And if you always want to be pitied, you'll never be able to be independent. You don't need anybody's sympathy. You need to go on and live your life and walk on the territory that God has given you. Some people want to just have a pity party. I get sick and tired of folk always want to be pitiful. You need to recognize that if you walk around always talking about the wounds in your life, always talking about your failed relationships, your heartbreak, your heart pain, if you always walk around singing songs like it's been stormy weather since my man and I been together, if you walk around all the time feeling like you are nothing, if you walk around wounded and carrying the pain of your wound with you, if you walk around acting as though you're the only one that ever had a hard time, if you walk around with your head hung down looking like you're sorry, you're sanctified, baptized in lemon juice, if you walk around looking like you deserve something that you don't have, sooner or later your scars will be as ugly as you look. Fall in love with me, scars and all. Fall in love with my marks. Fall in love with the things of my imperfection. Fall in love with the fact that I may not be perfect, but I'm in perfect hands. I thought about this because there's some people that you and I both know of, all of us know of, who have embraced their scars. They've got to the place where they are able to exhibit their scars. Queen Latifah has a scar in the middle of her forehead. And the scar on her forehead is there from an accident years ago. And she says, I'd never cover it up. She told InStyle magazine, it gives my face character. Look at somebody, tell them, neighbor, I've got good character. You do know Seal. Seal probably has the most horrific scars around. Seal suffered from a debilitating disease of the skin that came underneath the skin. It was a form of lupus, and it's called DLE, and that disease all on his skin caused an inflammatory scarring in his face. And if you see his face is still kind of, it's got a bad scar on it. But I want to tell you something. If you close your eyes and hear him sing, lady, when you open them back up, you're glad he's still there. That scar never stopped him from marrying one of the most beautiful women in the world. J.R. Martinez, a young corporal in the airborne division, he fooled around and got burnt up. You probably remember him because he was one of the Dancing with the Stars champions. He says now he views his scars as a gift. He's been stretched. He's had skin grafts. He's had all kinds of stuff. But in the midst of it all, his scar has become a gift. Oh, y'all don't hear. Hey. Padma Lakshmi is a young woman who many of y'all have seen as a fashion model, a beautiful girl. She was a former model and a host of Top Chef. She has a 7-inch scar that goes down her arm, and you used to worry about that scar. It happened when she was 14 years old and got into a car wreck. But now she says, I love it because it makes me a person who has an interesting past. Tap somebody, tell them I got an interesting past. Can I preach a little while? Mary J. Blige. Mary J. Blige, Grammy Award singer, shown up good-looking woman, but she has a scar over her left eye. Some people say it came from a fight. Some people talk about the fact that she got some stuff wrong with her. But Mary J. Blige said this: if I don't accept the scar on my face, the lips that God gave me, the big giant feet, the long legs, whatever it is that I'm deformed with, I got to love it so everybody else can love it. And I started loving it. Let me help you right. If nobody else loves you, you've got to learn to love yourself. I could go on all day. I could go on all day. Joaquin Phoenix had a cleft lip, but it's never stopped him from being a great actor. Kate Middleton, who's now the Duchess of Cambridge, who just had the young princess in her life, she has a serious scar that runs along her hairline, but it sure didn't stop the prince from marrying her. Catherine Zeta-Jones has a 1.5-inch scar where she had a tracheotomy, but it sure didn't stop her from being a beautiful model and a beautiful actress. I'm just trying to tell you, I know you might have some stuff wrong, but look at somebody now, tell them you can live with it. And then you have to go from exhibiting to exalting. From exhibiting to exalting. See, I could just show you that I got it, but at some point I need to let you know how good God's been to me in the midst of it. All right, y'all didn't get that. I got 2 quick stories. Y'all don't mind if I tell a little story? The first one is there was a little boy who was playing down by the riverside, and his mother was watching him from his kitchen, and she was looking, and they were in deep Florida, and all of a sudden an alligator came out the water and grabbed the boy. Mama ran outside, grabbed her son, and was yelling and screaming for help. One of those truckers came by, you know those young boys with them trucks and got guns in the back. He heard her yelling, saw the gator, grabbed his gun, killed the gator. But the gator had the boy in his mouth. So after a while, when the boy started getting healed, the Florida Senator went to interview the boy. And the boy, they were looking at, they wanted to see his leg. He said, no. He said, you don't want to see my leg. Yeah, the gator had me there. You need to look at my arm and see where my mama's nails dug in. I come to preach today. Let me look at somebody, tell them I got a scar from where God dug his nails in, holding on to me all the days of my life. I'm going to my seat. You do know my friend Dr. Ed Harding. When Dr. Ed Harding battled with cancer, they cut him from here all the way down. He said they gut me like a pig, but he said when they got through gutting me, he said I had to get used to seeing my own body. I couldn't stand to look at myself. But he said, let me tell you something. I've realized that my scars are an expression of my triumph. He says, you don't know how I triumph absent my scars. When you see my scars, when you see what I've been through, you can see my testimony that God has been good to me. Oh, I know I got a witness in here. There's somebody in here that can testify. God has been good to you. He's healed your body. He's picked you up. He's carried you out. He bought you off drugs. He got you out of jail. He made your life over. You endured affliction. You went through a hard time. You were abused and misused, but your scars are your testimony. You can tell the world, I serve a God that gives testimony. I serve a God that makes a way out of no way. Have I got a witness? Do me a favor. High five somebody. Just tell them I got a testimony. 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 Have I got a witness? Is there anybody here that can say I got a testimony? I've been through, I've been down, started at the bottom, but now I'm here. God has made a way out of no way. God has worked it out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on, give God a praise. Come on, give God a praise.